Welcome back, everybody. I have an awesome episode for you today. But before we get into that, the sponsor of the podcast, let's talk about it, blackriflecoffee.com. If you head over to their website right now, you're going to see a Father's Day sale using the code DAD30, 30% off selected items. I'm reading this on a Friday. This comes out on a Monday, and Father's Day falls on a Sunday. So I'm not sure if this is still going to be valid, but you could always give it a try. And like most days dedicated to a thing, maybe it's okay to think about those things on days other than just the one dedicated to it. So there's always a good time to get your father or somebody you care about something coffee related if they like it. And you can look through all the roasts that they have. Maybe you could get them apparel or gear or a coffee bundle. Or where I like to start people, if they don't know much about the brand, is the coffee sampler. It's a smaller bag of coffee, and you get a bunch of them so you can tell whether or not you like it, what you do like, what you don't. And it's a good way to support an amazing brand and an even better way to give a gift to a loved one. On to the episode for today. Man, I've been circling around with this guest for years. We've almost linked up a few times. We have a ridiculous amount of friends in common, an overlap of our social circle. It is Miss Tulsi Gabbard. She was a congressman for Hawaii for 8 years and a presidential candidate in 2020. She has a new book that just came out that is on the New York Times bestseller list. She was making her way through Montana, and after my time with her, she went to the coffee shop, signed a bunch of her books, went up to Whitefish and did some Title IX stuff, and then continued on, I believe, to the Bozeman area for a SIG event. A busy woman for sure. I love her insight into politics. I love how articulate she is and how she can talk about it, not only at the breadth and depth, but from personal experience as well. So, episode number 340 with Tulsi Gabbard. Enjoy.
Okay, got the red smoke.
Gun run, north to south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby. Give it to me. I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
When'd you get back?
10 hours ago.
Oh my gosh. How many of those hours did you sleep?
Not many.
Okay.
I told myself I was going to have just the most restful night. I'm like, actually, no, we've been back longer than 10 hours. We got back at 6 p.m. yesterday, forced it, went to bed about 10.
Okay.
Figured I'd sleep through the night, and then 4 a.m. came.
Yeah.
Ding!
Yep.
And it was rough.
Yeah.
That was one of the coolest trips I've ever done, though. I'm assuming you've been.
I've not.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not.
It was one of the last things I've had on my bucket list, and I think I delayed it because that is not the easiest place to visit.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I wear dark mirrored sunglasses.
Yeah.
Even one of the tougher people that I think we both know, Mr. Timothy Kennedy,
Yeah.
was he described it as ugly crying. I tried to let him know that nobody really looks great when they cry. Mm-hmm. But on Omaha Beach, he's all the way down by the water, doing an interview. We weren't able to go on D-Day because I'm not going to keep the names out of this. A president of a country that we may live in. The security barrier. It was a 10-hour window. We would have had to go in there early. And same thing happened at Point du Hoc. Timothy talked his way past the guards. So we actually got to go see the memorial, but they were already setting up. So everybody who came there that day was not able to go down to the memorial itself.
That's insane.
It sucks.
That is insane.
It should be about people's ability to go see that stuff.
Exactly.
So we went around this schedule. So we went to Omaha Beach on the 7th instead of the 6th, but at low tide, at sunrise, nobody there, all the way out to the waterline, and look back at 400 plus yards.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it.
And in the back of my head, Tim and I were talking about this quite a bit. Every place we visited, Mont St. Mary Glee, the Battery, Point du Hoc, we would just talk about the tactical environment. Mm-hmm. Like at the top of Point du Hoc, there is just this little section where you could hide maybe 6 people. And on the other side of that is a concrete German bunker. So I was asking him, like, what's the move? Tim, what would you do?
Yeah.
Would you wait for 6 or would you just go? Mm-hmm. Of course, he's insane. He's like, I would just go. I'm like, okay, so you'd have a cross up on the cemetery.
Right.
But Omaha Beach was unbelievable. And then at the top of Omaha Beach, all the way up on the hill, is the American Cemetery. I don't have the words.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. 45 pairs of brothers, over 9,000 headstones. And I don't know if it's a special quality of marble, but touching the porousness of the top of the marble, it was so cold. It was unbelievable. Like, just speechless.
Yeah, it's been on my bucket list for, over 20 years.
Same.
When I went through, I was enlisted for 4 years in the Army first, and I went through officer candidate school. And one of the things that we did during officer candidate school was they played, each episode of Band of Brothers, and then we had to write essays on leadership and lessons learned, both good examples, bad
From Band of Brothers?
examples from Band of Brothers.
Damn you, Tom Hanks.
I've since watched. I've at least 10 times I've watched the whole series.
Every deployment we went on, that was the classic.
Yes.
Band of Brothers. Bad weather, put it in.
Yes, and it's always amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is still on my bucket list to go.
The
I had a hard time. I won't say I had a hard time, but over this past week, you guys were all out there. I had other friends who were out there, and I was seeing all the videos and pictures on social media, and then people were texting me all this stuff. And, even just from back here, I was flooded with emotion. All of these different mixes of like, wow, what an incredible experience. Seeing the guys who were still alive go and walk on that sand.
They'll never be able to do it
just
again.
heart-wrenching and, inspiring and incredible seeing the reception and just the crowds of people out on the streets and the kids and waving American flags. And it was just, I don't know. It's like words don't even adequately express, even from an observer's standpoint all the way back here. I can't even imagine walking down those streets there.
We jumped into the battery about an hour later. This is the same day that Tim re-enlisted, completely out of regulation and everything that he was wearing, with a 4-star general and the CSM of the Army, who both looked at him, and the only thing they said was, "You look awesome."
They're so jealous.
Completely. Both of them are like giggling.
Of course.
Everything is perfect. He's got a
course.
mohawk blowing all over the place.
Yeah.
And face paint. About an hour before that, 2 veterans from World War II, one that had been in the Pacific and one that had been in the European theater, showed up in wheelchairs. I think they were both 99. And I'm not exactly, it was so cool. There was a man and a woman, a French couple, singing basically like 1940s swing music, and they were dressed up in American. The amount of American uniforms was unbelievable. I saw more American flags in France than I've ever seen in the United States. Wow. Every street corner. I don't know what they said. I think they announced that the veterans were there. We had to put up caution tape, and Tim got like his sergeant major voice on and was yelling at people to get back because they flooded these people in the wheelchairs.
Wow.
And I was standing there because we were part of the, how did this work? Black Rifle donated money to the group that brought them out. So we were kind of just standing there, and I could overhear some of the conversations.
Yeah.
In broken English most of the time from the French people, and every one of them, thank you, just wanted to hold their hand, wanted to take a picture. And one of the vets was so awesome. He got there and he asked for a drink, and Tim asked him what he wanted. It's like, "We have water." He goes, "No." I'm like, okay, we have beer or wine. It's that second one. Red or white? Red. "How much do you want?" And he just kept. So he had like a plastic cup of red wine and sat there and talked to people and was just throwing it back. The guy's 99. Line up the bottles. Like, you get as much as you want, sir.
The rules don't apply.
No, they don't apply. And come to find out, he had carried a flamethrower on Iwo Jima. Like, you can have as much as you want. But they were, the veterans were like rock stars.
Yeah.
And I talked a lot about this with Tim too. He was staying at the same house as us. So we had a bunch of time to talk. I don't think there'll ever be a celebration like that for our era of service. And I don't know what that means. I mean, it was different. We didn't exactly liberate and push back fascism and communism and liberate that portion of the world. And I'm so proud to see that outpouring of patriotism, albeit it was through French people.
Yeah. Yeah. But even so, still, after all this time.
Yeah. It's deeply ingrained. One thing that some of the older French did make a point of telling me is that there is a connection that is being lost from some of the younger generations, which I think is natural.
Yeah.
There were some people who were alive when the invasion occurred. I mean, in one of the churches where the classic iconic image of the paratrooper with the tongue up on the church, I have a picture of it on my phone. On the stained glass in the church are paratroopers.
Wow.
Like, you've got to be kidding me. And people are in there lighting candles for them. It was unbelievable. But I just don't think there will ever be something like that for our era of service.
Yeah, I don't see it.
I don't see it either. And I don't know where I land on that. I'm proud of my service, but also maybe that's okay. Maybe that's just the way things evolve over time, because it was a different type of war.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine going back to Kabul or Baghdad and getting the reception that they got.
Yeah.
I think it might be slightly different.
I think completely different.
And it would probably involve like car bombs.
Yeah.
And IEDs.
Yeah.
So it was cool. I'm glad I went. I cannot recommend enough that you go.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait. For whatever reason, it hasn't happened yet. And I know that at the right time, it'll be the right time. And I look forward to just being able to go and pay my respects and to experience that.
I would almost recommend going in the off time. There is a lot of time in cars.
Yeah, I hear they, you mean not on D-Day?
I would not advocate against that.
Sure.
I think the logistics would be a lot easier if you went in July.
Yeah.
Or May.
Yeah.
To the point where I think I'll go back. I think it's some other time. And it was so amazing to see all these things. But with all those things was a complication of traffic.
Sure.
Thousands of people. Yeah, it's all still there.
Yeah.
It's all still there. You could almost hear, like when we were standing on Omaha, sitting there talking with Tim, you could almost ask yourself, like, am I making up that sound of gunfire? Like just being drawn back into that time? Hard pass.
Yeah.
He asked me what wave I would have wanted to be on. I said 700.
Seriously.
400 yards.
Oh my gosh.
400 yards. What brought you into the military?
9/11.
Okay.
I think like a lot of people.
Where
I
were
never.
you?
I was in Hawaii. Born in American Samoa, grew up in Hawaii, and didn't really think of quote unquote foreign policy or war or anything like that until 9/11. And Hawaii's obviously a huge military state. We have some of the biggest bases obviously out there in the Pacific.
Strategically important.
Strategically important. So grew up around that culture and that environment. But the thought of joining the military, it just never crossed my mind. And it was, the time difference between Hawaii and New York. Obviously, I just remember waking up. I was renting this. You could call it a studio, but it was really like a carport garage with
Closet.
some plywood blocking the front of it. And my bathroom was like the laundry room with the laundry sink and whatnot.
I'm familiar with the first apartment setup.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but I just remember turning on the news when I woke up that morning, which would have been...
It would have occurred at night in Hawaii, right?
It was roughly 3 a.m. in Hawaii time.
Okay, yeah.
And so by the time Hawaii woke up to that news, it was the replaying over and over, and it was the footage of the beginnings of the recovery, and still trying to get people out. But I knew that I felt that call to serve somehow, some way, and ultimately I decided to join the Hawaii National Guard. I was already very engaged in serving my community there, and was serving. I was serving in the state legislature when I enlisted, and so for me, joining the National Guard was an opportunity for me to be able to continue that service at home, and also answer the call to serve our country if it came, and it came pretty quickly.
What drew you to wanting a job in the state legislature?
I grew up in a beautiful place like you have here.
I didn't grow up here, unfortunately.
You didn't grow up here.
Oh, people are going to hate me because I was born in California.
Oh my gosh. How dare you?
Which, I mean,
At
Michael
a different
knows,
time.
Yeah. You're not supposed to tell people up here you're from California. They believe that those are the people that will ruin the state of Montana. They forget the step that the ones leaving California are the ones who are not happy or aligned with the trajectory of California.
Yeah.
So maybe they're a little bit more in line. Hopefully. It's the ones who come, from what I can tell, and they buy a fifth or sixth home up here.
They're driven by escaping taxes, and
they park the jet up there. They stay for a little bit, but they try to implement the politics of where they came from here in their vacation home.
Yeah.
So California, Santa Cruz, where I'm from, beautiful Monterey Bay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful, different type of beautiful. I like this type of topographical relief. Mountains, Glacier National Park is like, you saw it probably when you were coming in on your flight.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. But that's, for me, growing up, it's a small island chain, but, we have the mountains, we have the ocean, and it is paradise. And so I just grew up with a strong appreciation for protecting our home. And so it was conservation, environmental issues that largely drove me to run for the state house. I was 21 at the time, and I looked at the people who were there, and they were mostly like retirees who were kicking their feet up on the desk. I'm like, yeah, all right, cool. This is a good gig. You work 4 months out of the year and then go play golf. But there was something I got involved with as 18 or 19 years old, where I think it was probably my first realization of corruption in government.
Are the two generally tied?
Government and corruption. It is hard
Tell
to
me
separate.
more. I've never heard
It is
this.
hard to separate. There was a big landfill developer in Hawaii who was trying to build a landfill over one of our 3 major water aquifers that supplies all of our drinking water on the island of Oahu.
Why would anybody even start a project with that idea?
Exactly. Limited real estate.
Yeah.
Why they would go and say, hey, let's go and build it over the water aquifer. So that was their plan. He was very good friends and a big donor of the then Senate president, who was kind of greasing the wheels for him. This thing was gaining traction and moving forward, cutting through the red tape. We found out about it and we're like, this is a really horrible idea. I don't care how many times you say you're going to put lining on it.
Yeah.
You are not going to poison the water of a source that provides water for over 300,000 people, over 300,000 people on the island. So anyway, I just joined a bunch of people. We started gathering signatures and went to the state legislature. Long story short, we stopped it from happening. And for me, experiencing that and seeing, number one, the corruption, but number two, hey, I can make a difference. We can make a difference. And so that's what drove me to run for the state house in Hawaii.
How was it bumping up against candidates that were that much older than you? I'd imagine
they took me for granted.
I was going to say that was probably their first talking point. What could she know about you?
Oh yeah,
What experience does she have? She's a child.
Well, I didn't have a bachelor's degree at the time, and my
I still don't have a bachelor's degree, for clarity. 0 seconds of higher education.
Good, all good. It's we should talk about that separately because I got strong feelings about that.
I set the bar low in high school and slid right underneath it. Barely graduated.
I was homeschooled, and so my parents. I'm 4th of 5 kids, and my parents just told all of us, hey, if you want to go to college, you're going to pay for it. You figure out what you want to study, what you want to learn, and, have at it. If you don't want to go to college, figure out what you're going to do with your life. And ultimately, it was about recognizing early on that true success is found in living a life of service. And whether you do that through business or the military or, as an educator, whatever your path is, that is where you will actually be happy. And anyway, so for a very long time, I protested going to college because I just why go and get a piece of paper? What does that mean? Because every time I saw, anyway, it's a whole thing. I applied for different jobs and this and that. Yeah. And they were like, oh, well, we would love to hire you. You're exactly what we're looking for, but you don't have a bachelor's degree, so we can't hire you. It's like, What's the difference? If you're saying that I am capable and qualified and I'm exactly the person you're looking for, but you're going to say no because I don't have a freaking piece of paper that cost a lot of money. I did end up getting it because this barrier still existed for a lot of the things that I wanted to do. But I'm glad to see now more and more, especially with the student debt crisis and all this stuff, businesses and organizations are realizing, well, maybe we should actually look at the person and look at your experience and who you are and what your capabilities are, and not just rely on whether or not you have a huge student loan account outstanding.
So I have 3 kids. We're in birthday season. My daughter just turned 16, going into her junior year of high school. My middle son is 18, going on 19, literally left on his first alone road trip to Oregon with his girlfriend today.
Nice.
I watched him pack and prepare, and I was talking with my wife. She goes, should we tell him? I'm like, no. Some lessons have to be learned on the way. He's only taking 1 blanket. He has a check card. He can figure that out along the way. And a 20-year-old getting ready to be 21, and I don't think I've achieved a lot in life, but I've done it without higher education. And I've watched that old guard system start to crumble with kids my age. They have mechanisms to educate themselves that we didn't.
Exactly.
I have watched my middle son he has started 2 businesses at the age of 18.
Oh my gosh.
He cleans windows.
Nice.
And he hangs Christmas lights in the off season.
Love it.
And has way too much cash for an 18-year-old. I'll come home, he's like, oh, I bought a guitar. I'm like, you don't know how to play guitar. I bought a surfboard. We live in Montana. Whatever. Put it up on the wall. But how in my right mind can I say to them, you have to follow this traditional path? And then there's my wife, who was raised in academia. Her parents were teachers. And their advice to her was pursue academia.
Right.
Bachelor's, multiple masters. She went back into teaching. All of that comes at a cost.
Yeah.
That 20 years later is still chipping away at her. The only debt you can get without showing any debt to income, you would never be qualified for that level of money in any other lending capacity.
Nope.
But let's give it to you. And by the way, you can't ever write it off if you go bankrupt.
Nope.
How about no?
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
I'm not that I'm not an idiot now, but I was an idiot at 21. And if you'd have given me $100,000 worth of free money, I would have taken all of that and not put it towards education.
Right. Exactly.
Why would you do that?
There's also a cost of just life experience, especially for people who spend so much time in school. And I meet people, oh yeah, I got this and I graduate that. So I think I'm going back to school and then going back to school. And it's just like, man, there's a whole world out there. What are you learning in a classroom that you couldn't learn in like real life? And that was one of the decisions that I made when I decided to run for State House, because I was trying to decide. People were saying, oh, you should go and you can get a degree in political science. You want to make a difference and yada, yada, yada. And there was an opening in a State House seat in my community. And so that was my fork in the road. It's like, or I can go to school and talk about it, or I can actually just go and do it and recognize that, it's going to be tough. It's going to take a lot of work. Whatever the outcome, it's a win-win from my standpoint, because I will have learned and gained such an incredibly unique experience by going and actually just doing this. And that was, I was in a 5-way, Hawaii's a Democrat state. Election was going to largely be decided in the primary. There was a Republican challenger, but it was a 5-way contest in the Democratic primary. And there was, I was running against an engineer, a nurse, and a teacher, and people who were very well established in their professions. And what it came down to was, and I'd knock on people's doors and introduce myself, and they were like, oh my gosh, you're so young. And I said, yes. Don't you want fresh leadership? Don't you want people with energy coming and trying to tackle the problems that we're facing? My community was the fastest growing community on the island at that time, with a lot of infrastructure problems where they weren't keeping up with the growth. So I ended up winning the primary. I knocked on every door in my district almost 3 times. And then the Republican general election challenger, he was a private practice physician. He created a brochure that had 2 columns, one with his picture and his name on one side, me and my picture and name on the other side. And then the whole page was filled with all of his accomplishments in life, his educational pedigree, the whole thing. And on my side, he put 21 years old. And that was it. And he was so confident. He was like, when people see this, how could anyone in their right mind
First off,
vote for
Mr.
her?
List Everything, you look like a douchebag.
Exactly. And he was.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
That's the marketing ploy to get the vote of the younger generation.
Right.
Not the other side. Right. Yeah, he actually, that's fantastic that he did that for you.
I know. It's like, thanks for putting my name and face out there. Appreciate you.
Also, if that's all he has, if that's the argument, you don't have an argument.
Yeah.
Like your foundation is what? I'm older. Mm-hmm. I did more things outside of government. I probably have more connections to industry than I should have inside of government.
Yeah.
You're not selling me, buddy.
Yeah. And really, it just, to me, what became very clear was, as you said, he was a douche. He was all about himself. Look at me. Look at how great I am, rather than saying, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Tell me how I can work for you. Tell me about the problems that are on your mind that we can work to tackle. And
I don't hear any politicians in the modern era saying that. And again, maybe they're doing that in their offices. Maybe they're doing that off camera.
In private.
Maybe. Right. I'm trying to be generous because where I'm certainly not seeing them do that is public facing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I'm going to tear somebody, I'm going to try to make myself look better by tearing somebody down. Yeah. You know, the ad hominem, I'll attack the person as opposed to the argument. I see a lot of that. Mm-hmm. I don't see a lot of people who would be defined by their willingness, it seems externally, to be there to serve others, which I'm pretty sure is the job that we elect them to do.
That is the job description.
Yeah.
That is the difference between the term public servant to me versus politician. And the public servant part has become so lost both in elected officials as well as the administrative state and bureaucrats at almost, I won't say at every level of government, but certainly more so at the federal government and sometimes at the state and local government. You know, you'll come across some wonderful people who work in, you know, sometimes the DMV or maybe the library or other places. But too often what I see in Washington is people who find those who are calling and asking for help or saying, I need assistance with this or that. The people are a nuisance to their day-to-day lives. And they see us as, you know, rather than seeing themselves as the ones who are in a position to serve us, we are in a position, well, are we meeting your needs? Are we allowing you and your bureaucracy to thrive, or are we getting in the way of your day?
I mean, that's only 180 degrees wrong. So
Right.
There's that.
Exactly.
What is your take on the modern political spectrum, like the health of our government, given where we are now and where we are just full speed ahead towards in November? Is it salvageable?
It is dire, but it is salvageable. If it weren't salvageable, I would be home in Hawaii, and like
digging a
I'll
bunker,
I'll
like
just
Zuckerberg?
I don't have anywhere. I probably have about the amount he carries in his wallet, maybe.
I'm going to be digging my own. I have enough to get the shovel at Home Depot. The rest of the work is going to come on my shoulders.
It is salvageable, and this is one of the things that I'm focused on is just really I'm traveling across the country over these next 5 months through this election, because to me this is the most important election of our lives, given the dire straits that we're facing. And if we continue to see, and it's disheartening but understandable how many people are disengaged from what's going on in the country, disengaged from quote unquote politics.
Do you think that's intentional though? This is another one I think of looking at the ceiling fan at night.
Yes.
Are they trying to make it that way?
Yeah.
Bombard people with everything is left or right. It's dogmatic. It's politicized until people just say, I can't keep track of this anymore, and they don't pay attention.
And they don't pay attention, and they stay home, and then they probably don't vote. And then we have somewhere between 40 to 50% of people who are registered voters actually turning out to cast their vote. And generally speaking, those are people who live in the extremes and who are like wholeheartedly engaging in this us versus them battle, which is intentional. It's not an accident that those fires are being stoked by people in, you know, the propaganda media, the politicians, the political parties. It's us versus them, because as long as our arrows are pointed at each other, then we're not paying attention to what they're doing to our country.
Yeah.
There is hope. There is hope. And I remind people everywhere I go that we if we are not happy with the direction our country is headed in, if we're not happy with the fact that our fundamental freedoms enshrined in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution are being eroded on a daily basis, if we are not happy with the destruction of the rule of law that we are seeing happening in our country before our very eyes, if we're not happy with the fact that this whole idea of democracy as a system of representative governance is becoming this facade that doesn't actually exist because we have people in power who are very directly and indirectly trying to take away our freedom to choose who we want to vote for, period. If we are not happy with the fact that our open borders are making it so that we are really no longer a nation, and the fact that we are facing, on a foreign policy standpoint, we are closer to the brink of a World War III breaking out and a nuclear Armageddon more now than we ever have been in my life, certainly.
Yeah.
If we're not happy with any of these things, we could go, boys competing against girls in girls' sports. There's a track team in Hawaii that was just reported. There are more biological boys on the girls' track team at this school in Hawaii. So you can imagine who is taking the podiums. You can imagine who's competing for scholarships and opportunities. If we're not happy with what's going on here, we are the only ones who can take action to fix it and to save it.
How do we, on that issue, I know you're going, actually, I saw the flyer going up to Whitefish
Yes.
later. You're really hitting the Montana circuit. I like it.
Yeah, making the most of it.
What was it? It was something about Title IX. What was the name of that?
Yeah, the event that I'm going to is called, it's being hosted by an organization called the Independent Women's Forum. It's a nonpartisan group that is probably one of the oldest organizations that's been an advocate for fairness for women. And they have been at the tip of the spear in taking on this destruction of Title IX, this rejection of objective truth that there are biological differences between men and women and boys and girls, and actually doing what every organization that claims to stand for women should be doing, which is protect our girls, protect girls and women's sports, stand up for what Title IX was created for, specifically out of a recognition of the difference between men and women and boys and girls that President Biden just absolutely destroyed with the stroke of a pen.
What worries me about Title IX, women are stronger than men. Maybe not from a physiological perspective, but from psychologically. Tool, do I think, deal with more pain than men? Just from a child rearing perspective, we can agree that if men had to have kids, we're dead. One generation over. It's not happening. Maybe we would last 2 generations, but that's it. But women are the only ones who are going to be able to stand for and fight for Title IX appropriately.
Yeah.
And if they don't band together, because Montana is a little bit isolated from some of the social issues. Mm-hmm. And maybe Michael could look it up. I don't know if there has been an issue yet of a biological male competing against biological women, certainly not at a level like state recognition or national recognition, but I do see it happening all over. And I wonder how far that is going to allow to be progressed before it destroys women's sports.
Yeah.
And I hope that they hear me. You don't want dudes fighting this fight for you. It has to be women fighting this fight for the space and freedoms and privileges that you absolutely deserve. Like, we don't need a guy coming in to fight this fight.
Why do you say that?
Because men are good at breaking shit. And at the end of the day, women make up, I think, 50 or 51% of the population. They're unstoppable if they band together.
Yeah.
I just think it's a more powerful fight if it's organized and fought through women's voices, as opposed to, it's like me saying, like, hey guys, like, it's not fair. Like, no, it's not fucking fair. But hearing women's voice, it's more powerful.
Yeah, I don't think it's an either or. I think definitely we as women need to be at the forefront of saying, like, this affects us very directly. And also we need fathers of daughters standing up and saying, don't you dare mess with my kid. So I think it is to me an all of the above, but I agree that women must first and foremost be willing to stand up for ourselves and speak the truth, Because if we're not willing to do that, how can we expect anyone else to?
Yeah, it won't happen unless they're willing to do so.
That's right.
And they're going to have to step on toes, and people's feelings are going to get hurt.
Yeah.
I don't know any idea that doesn't cut across somebody's axis line. Like, I don't care. I mean, you could go to, I don't know if there's an altruistic religion, whatever it may be. Somebody is as devout as they think they are. There's somebody else on earth that hates you for your belief.
Yes.
Accept that. Stand for what you believe in. How about we stand for the spaces that the women in our lives deserve? It is, to me, the most baffling. When people say that there is no difference, I just, like, have you ever left your house?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And if we can't agree on that level of baseline truth, I don't know if this country survives.
And this is why this fight before us is so critical, because we are on this breaking point on so many levels where things that are undeniably and objectively true, biologically true, we have people in positions of power, not just a couple of people. This is what I get into in my book is you have the Democrat elite in Washington, people who I worked with for 8 years, many of whom I found to be otherwise. You could have a common sense conversation with them and you might agree or disagree, but you could make a case and be like, all right, I hear you. However, here's where I'm coming out on it. Not a single one of them. How is it possible that not a single Democrat in the House of Representatives or in the United States Senate or in the White House has come out and said, no, this is wrong. There are biological differences between men and women. And when you do what Joe Biden just did with Title IX, where basically he added the word transgender in there, which according to their definition is any boy at any time on any day of the week in school can say, I think I'm a girl. And that school now is forced, public schools, is forced to comply with that and recognize that boy based on whatever name or gender that he chooses. That's all it takes is one boy saying, this is who I am and this is how I feel. Maybe he changes his mind the next day or the next week. But as soon as that boy says that, he now must be treated as though he's a girl, which means you've got access to the girls' bathroom and the girls' locker room and to girls' sports and everything else.
That's how you end up dead in the parking lot. I mean, I'm sorry, but my 16-year-old girl, that's really not the play.
Yeah.
And and then I end up going to jail.
Yeah.
It's like, shit.
Yeah. This doesn't end well for anybody.
No. It's like, okay, I'd have made a difference. Maybe. Nope, didn't. I'm in jail. Awesome.
There's a congressman from California named Mark Takano. He and I were elected to Congress the same year in 2012. He was asked, I think it was in a committee hearing, that he was participating as on the witness side of the table. And it was around this issue. He's gay. He was around this issue of transgender boys and girls in sports. And I don't remember who asked the question, but they basically said, so what you're telling me is that if Mike Tyson said today that he identifies as a woman, he should be allowed to go and compete against
I've seen this
girl.
video.
I know. And the fact that this congressman from California didn't even hesitate or blink or anything before he said, yes, he should.
So are these people, again, you mentioned every member essentially of the Democratic Party that works
at least in Washington.
So
they're going along with this insanity.
Are they getting briefing notes on this? Like, where are they being
I'm sure
told?
they are. I'm sure they are. I don't, because some of these people are fathers of daughters, and I have a really hard time understanding how they could accept this and know that it will directly impact their child.
What happens what would happen to that person if he said, no, you're right, Mike Tyson cannot be a woman if he says so?
That person, I am Exhibit A. I am Exhibit A. That person would be excoriated, called a transphobe, ridiculed, disinvited from all of the things that politicians care about in Washington, whether it's the parties or the fancy meetings. You become like excommunicated from the leadership of the Democratic Party. So if you care about your so-called political career, that would essentially be a political suicide.
I think we need to make it impossible for somebody to have a political career.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on term limits?
I'm not sold that that's the way to do it. And there's two reasons why. One is in some states where they've implemented term limits, we've seen the focus from the big corporate lobbyists. Like, first of all, how does someone, let's just start, well, why should we even have this conversation? When you look at people like Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, people who've been there for over 40 years.
Longer than they've been out of politics.
Yes, the power of incumbency is what makes it very, very difficult, not impossible, but close to impossible for someone like you or me to just walk in off the street and say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to go run against, I use my words carefully here. I'm going to go.
That was Tulsi speaking, not me, for the NSA listening in real time.
I am going to go.
In the metaphorical sense.
Yes. I am going to go and, run against a Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell. And people have tried, and people do try continuously. But the power of incumbency gives you all of the money from the big corporate PACs and lobbyists. And so, this is what they do every day. You'll go to a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner fundraiser, and you'll be able to raise tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. You match that against somebody who's just like, okay, I want to go and serve my country in Congress. I think that this person's doing a bad job. They are starting from scratch. And so whether you're doing the Bernie Sanders model of $27 a person, which was a game changer. You can say what you will about Bernie Sanders. It was an incredible thing to see how he outraised Hillary Clinton with small dollar contributions from everyday Americans. But this is why we have a conversation about term limits, because how do you counteract that amount of money and notoriety when you are just a person who wants to go and make some positive change? So recognizing that, you look at the focus that these corporate PACs and lobbyists have in places where they've implemented term limits in some states. We've seen their focus shift away from the elected representative and turn towards the staff, the chiefs of staff, the professional committee staff.
That's another change I think we need to make.
What's that?
People don't realize how little of the government we actually get to vote on.
Yeah.
And how much of the government stays in place.
That's right.
The best example I have is this. In the SEAL community, there was an officer detailer. Mm-hmm. I had great experiences with her. She had sticky notes all the way back until the 4-star admirals were ensigns. Wow. She was the power broker of your career.
Yeah.
If you got on her bad side, have fun shipping barnacles, even if that's a job. If you were on her good side, trajectory to the absolute top. But every 2 years, an officer would rotate in, so there would be an active duty person there. You think anybody's trying to talk to the active duty officer?
Yeah.
They're like, no. They'll wait till they're out of office because you go to this one person. Mm-hmm. She held more power than anybody else. Those people are all over the government.
They are.
And people think, oh, okay, it's going to be Biden or Trump, and that's going to change everything. I don't know how many people are in the cabinet that they bring in, but the tens of thousands of people who are just ticked in, burrowed deep, sucking the blood out of the government that we never see and get to vote on. Like, we have to change that too.
I agree. Wholeheartedly agree. Every president has the opportunity to appoint, I don't know the exact number, somewhere around 4,500 political appointees across all of these different agencies. But this is where what you're talking about, bringing about those reforms that make it so that when you come in as president, you can fire people.
Yeah.
And you can hire new people, bring in new blood, bring in people with new energy. The pushback against this, of course, is like, well, this will be political retaliation because you want to come in and get rid of all of the old person's, people. But we as voters need to be able to hold leaders accountable.
Yeah.
And we saw this during President Trump's first term in office. I was in Congress at the time, and I saw it, and it pissed me off when we had people coming in from working in the Pentagon and the State Department and actually testifying before Congress about how they were essentially not supporting or executing the policies coming from President Trump's White House because they didn't think it was good for the country. And so they decided to do their own thing.
They became their own personal filter.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they saw themselves, and this is the arrogance of it all, is they see themselves. I don't know if you remember that guy, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman was one of them. that he sat there in an army dress uniform giving this testimony before Congress about how he did exactly that he was taking some bold and courageous stand to protect the country from President Donald Trump. And of course, Democrats applauded him, and they still lift him up. His brother's running for Congress right now, and he's a hero in their eyes for having the courage to stand up against Donald Trump. It's not the oath we take, and you know, take away the name Donald Trump and put Andy Stump in that name.
Let's not do that. That would be a good name for somebody who's never running for office.
But the point is, like, who the hell are you to think that you have more say than the American people in this democratic, representative, democratic republic, that you just get to veto the decision that they made at the ballot box? You can disagree all that you want with that decision. But number one, in his case, first of all, you're wearing a uniform. Number two, even if you're a State Department, desk officer, you believe that you are above the will of the American people in a democracy, which means you don't believe in the democracy, which means you don't believe in the Constitution, which brings us back to this core point of why we are in such dire straits here, because we have a whole group of people, both elected and unelected, in Washington. And this is when people say the deep state. This is the deep state, because they don't believe in our form of government. They don't believe in the Constitution. They don't believe that the American people, that we should actually have the right to make our own decisions. And so they're doing all of these things because they really, really, really believe that they have to protect us from making the wrong decision that would be bad for us. And so they're going to take away our freedom, and they're going to take away our rights and our liberty, because they and only they know what's best for the country. And oh, by the way, that also happens to be maintaining their position of power.
The hubris in that is unbelievable.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
Michael, are you ready to start a revolution?
I don't think I should
He's
answer
like,
that
why are you
question.
bringing me into this?
I'm going to get you a beret and a musket. And probably, I don't know, a wool outfit that you can wear in D.C. in July. It'll be great. Send you by yourself because you're going to get your ass kicked.
As long as I'm getting paid, I'll do whatever you want.
There you go.
Yeah, it's worrisome. I have another one. I think that anybody that votes for war has to either go themselves or declare a family member to go. And no adoption bullshit like outsourcing this to a staffer. Like if you raise your hand.
The fact that you even have to say that.
Because I've thought about it.
Through that loophole.
Yes. They'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to send my brother Earl. I'm like,
yeah.
The brother Earl you've had for 4 hours because you just, war is the ugliest thing I've ever been involved in.
Yeah.
And it's also the most beautiful thing I've ever been involved in. It changed me as a person. My theory is if you touch war, it touches you back.
Yeah.
I think it can make you a better version of yourself.
I understand that.
But the people who have committed us to war are almost always not the ones who have to go.
That's true.
And I feel like if they had a seat on the plane overseas, they might be a little bit more hesitant to raise their hand or push the button, however it actually goes.
Yeah. It's the button.
Is it a button?
Yeah.
I don't know. I can see, but I don't know. It's 2024. Yeah, it's probably a button. Probably a Bluetooth little puck for your garage door opener.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back, to all of both. I've been on both sides of this now. So while I was in my first deployment to Iraq was in 2005, and just seeing
as the kinetic time period was increasing, it was
a pretty hot time.
Yeah.
The churn of members of Congress that would come, touch down for 24 hours, shake a few hands, take a few pictures, and then get on the plane and go back. It really pissed me off.
I would extend their stay, be like, oh, the C-17 broke, but here's some body armor, and you're up on the 50 in the Humvee.
Yeah, exactly.
Just going to do a little, supply run.
Yeah,
Say,
you really want
apples.
to know what's going on. You really want to know how the troops are doing.
Yeah.
I went on a different. So then obviously I became a member of Congress later, and I went on some of these CODELs, and I remember going to one in Afghanistan. For those listening, a CODEL is a congressional delegation. And I went to one in Afghanistan, and so we were at kind of the main hub or one of the main bases, and the commanding officer general at the time said, hey, we've got we're going to take a bird over to one of our outposts. Do you want to come? And the other members who were there, they're like, I'm good. And,
Just here for the photo op.
Naturally, I said, yes. Can I sit by the door, please?
Yeah.
And to me, it was a strange thing to not see everyone fighting for a seat on that bird, and that so many of these people, especially the ones who've been there for a very long time over the last 20 years, they have the audacity to go and go on CNN or Fox or whatever cable news channel of choice at the end and being like, I've been to Afghanistan 27 times.
Yeah.
And not be challenged on it by anyone in the media.
The Pizza Hut at Bagram.
Exactly. And not be challenged by it and say, oh, really, 27 times. What did you do there? What did you see? Where did you go exactly?
Yeah.
To create this false pretense that I have, quote unquote, seen war, and then they go and vote for more stupid, counterproductive, unnecessary wars. I don't know about making it it would require a constitutional amendment to make this change happen.
I will write that paperwork.
I think that the people have to hold them to a higher standard than we are, and it's unfortunate that we are at the base. We are below the baseline. It's a huge accomplishment in Congress now if they get their shit together and pass a budget and a funding bill. I don't know that that's been done over the last 10, 15 years.
Maybe if they can't balance the budget, they get ejected.
Yeah, or don't get paid.
Yes.
Like he said, don't get paid.
Well, funny you mentioned Michael because he doesn't do shit unless he gets paid. So, I mean, you want to talk about motivation?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you don't get your check either.
Yeah.
What is our mechanism? Do we have any mechanism other than voting to create these changes?
Voting is the ultimate point. But if you're saying, okay, anybody can go and show up and cast their vote. In order to make these changes, we have to do the work of educating ourselves and informing ourselves, and not just buying the one-liners that you're going to hear during a debate. Actually go and again, you see Joe Biden now claiming to be the champion of democracy around the world, while when he turns around, he's destroying our democracy here at home. You talk about he after this Trump verdict in New York that just happened. Anybody, and there are even Democrats, even people who consider themselves progressive, who are objective, who've looked at that whole situation, the 34 felony counts. Mm-hmm. This has never been done before. And even the honest ones have pointed out publicly, this is ridiculous.
And from what I'm hearing, likely to be overturned as it goes through the appeals process. Yeah, misdemeanors that were elevated to felonies through I think the politest way to say it is a creative interpretation of the law.
Creative interpretation of the law. So it was, misfiling, I'm paraphrasing, but it's misfiling documents or whatever, paperwork. It's a paperwork thing. Mm-hmm. Apparently there were 34 signatures, and that's how they got the 34 counts. And then they turned it into felonies by saying that this was done in furtherance of a more serious crime. And the more serious crime, of course, they're alleging is interference in an election. Which, by the way, and this hasn't been talked about often enough, the federal government actually looked at this case to see, was this actually interference in a federal campaign? Was this a misuse of campaign money? Should this have been classified as a campaign expense instead of a legal expense? And the body that's responsible for making that determination at the federal level said, no, there's no case here. We're not going to take this up. And that was years before this New York case happened.
I think that's why it might bite him in the ass. It's similar in a way to the person you were running against in Hawaii, mm-hmm. who writes all this stuff out, and what they think, and I try to believe people when they're like, "Hey, this is what I believe." I'm like, "Okay,
yeah,
that's what you believe."
Yeah,
I do that because I try to understand other people.
Sure.
What trips some people up is they think if you understand, you agree. Mm-hmm. Like, no, understanding does not imply agreeance. I just want to understand and be able to have a conversation with somebody that I maybe don't agree with.
Yeah.
So when they say, this is what I believe, I get it, and in their mind maybe they do believe that they're trying to save the world from Trump round 2.
Yep.
But I think they're actually creating that template that the candidate you ran against in Hawaii.
Yeah.
People are looking at that. If that can happen to ex-president, who's going to stop something like that from happening to little old me?
And that is exactly the point. And that was the irony of what President Biden said. It was either the day of or the day after that jury verdict came out. You know, the usual, no one is above the law, yada, yada, yada. And we all must stand up and protect and defend the rule of law in America.
I wonder if he'll have that stance if it gets overturned at appeal.
Exactly.
Because that's part of the rule of law, too.
Exactly.
You have an appeals court.
Yeah.
The system is not done yet.
Yes.
And I'm not advocating for, I got a lot of problems with both Trump and Biden. I wish we could just vote on their policies and not the people, because that would actually, I think, make it a lot easier for people. They're different and similar in many ways.
Yep.
But that's the thing. Like, the first step came back with this result.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's over.
Yeah.
So if you are going to sit there and be like, look, the system worked because you got the result you wanted,
Exactly.
you have to also support it and defend it if it nets you the result you didn't.
Right.
And that is a piece of mental geometry that explodes most people's brain.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why.
Yeah. You know, and that's where you have people who you have some of these very same people who are saying that, you know, hey, we have to stand up and protect the rule of law. We have to respect the decision that was made by this court and this jury, and then just move on. But these are the very same people who, when the Supreme Court ruled unanimously against that Colorado case where they tried to remove Trump from the ballot, along with over 32 other states, the Supreme Court thankfully unanimously said, no, this is up to the people. You don't get to decide this unilaterally. These very same people who were touting upholding the rule of law in the New York case were the people who were criticizing the Supreme Court, saying they failed to uphold their constitutional responsibility.
They only support the result that they're looking for.
Exactly.
I ask people that when they will say, well, the court system is flawed because of this. I'll ask them, if it had gone the other way, would you have supported the decision? Of course I would have.
Yeah.
Like, then you don't have an issue with the court.
Right.
You have an issue with the result.
Right. Right.
And that's on you to deal with.
Right. Which again is why, and this is, you know, your point is important as we look at this election, is to separate the personalities from the substance and the record and the policies, because that is where you see the reality, and that is where you see the truth, and that's where you see the result. And so as we look at, okay, yes, we all must exercise our responsibility as American citizens and cast our vote in this election. Make sure you're educating yourself. And part of that is, don't be like, I listen to all different kind of podcasts usually while I'm working out, and I'll listen to podcasts from people or outlets that I know I'm not probably going to agree with. But I always pick up new knowledge and new information, and maybe they're coming at an issue from a perspective that I hadn't considered, and I'm like, oh, okay, I need to run down that rabbit hole and kind of figure that out and see, you know, I am able to grow in my own knowledge and understanding by being, as you said, open to trying to better understand where people are coming from, what their motives are, what their experiences are, what their intentions are. This allows us to be better critical thinkers and exercise better discernment as we think about, no, don't just vote, you know, straight down the party line. Go through and actually look at what do they stand for. Granted, my book is called For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind.
Super subtle, though.
You know, I am not known for, you know, beating around the bush.
Yeah.
I get into this, what we're talking about in the book about, you know, don't be blind followers of any political party or any group of whatever. We are.
It's good
it is
advice
not
for
a good.
life,
It
even
is.
outside of politics.
Don't be a groupthink person. But the reason why I titled my book in that way is because of what we just talked about. The fact that there is not a single Democrat in Washington, D.C. who has been elected by the people in their districts who is willing to stand up and say a boy is a boy and a girl is a girl shows the rot that is so deeply rooted in the Democrat elite in Washington. And I'm specific to make that distinction because I don't think any person should be judged along with an entire group of people. There are Democrats across the country who I hear from almost every day. Some are still Democrats, some have left the Democratic Party, but people who think for themselves and, who have some attachment, whether it's through family or some legacy with the Democrat Party, but who are absolutely incensed by the insanity that's coming out of the leadership of the Democrat elite and what they're doing to our country.
So my dad is 76. I had him on the show the other day. I told him directly, like, I'm shopping for a home for you because you're out of your mind. And he comes into the coffee
Like
shop.
a home.
Oh, yeah, I'm putting him away.
Okay.
Like Jell-O,
Okay.
foot massages.
I'm glad you're warning him.
I looked him right in the eyes. I'm like, you're out of your mind. I'm putting you in a home. And we laugh about it. He, I think, would describe himself as, for most of his life, pretty liberal on the Democratic. Definitely, I would say, maybe not both feet on the left, close to it.
Okay.
His thoughts is that,
He grew up in California.
yes,
Okay.
he doesn't recognize the Democratic Party anymore. He also doesn't recognize the Republican Party.
That's also true.
In his words, there is what a liberal meant and a conservative meant when he was grown up in the 1700s. And that's what I tell him, at least. I always ask him, like, how was it without electricity? He's just like, shut up, kid. But it has marched so far away from anything even remotely overlapping that it is just towards the fringes on a breakneck pace over a cliff. So he, even though he would have described himself as a Democrat earlier in his life, would be the first to tell you, like, I can't get on board.
Exactly.
I no longer recognize what that party claims that they are standing for. And I think more than anything, I don't know anything about politics, but I look at both sides of the aisle. I don't know how much of the quiet, want to be left alone, live their best life citizen that they're actually representing anymore. I think they're close to the 5% fringe that wants to scream at the ocean about the tide coming in.
Yeah.
And, wear their tidy whities on the outside of their pants because they're crazy. At least when
it's not a stretch. I'm laughing because there was a member of Congress who had somebody snuck a photo of him at a party wearing one of those furry costumes.
But here's the thing. At least then they're crazy.
Hey.
I had the internet described to me over in France in the most beautiful way. And that's where I got the tidy-whitey thing from. He was like, listen, when we were growing up, you'd go to 7-Eleven. And if there was a guy outside wearing his underwear on the outside of his pants talking about whatever was crazy at the time, you could see him and go, you know what? Maybe I'm not going to take everything that you say at face value.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
The internet has stripped our ability to do so.
Yeah.
So the guy wearing the underwear on the outside of his pants is just...
He's still wearing it, but...
He is, but you no longer can
Yeah.
tell. So you have to sift through this.
Yeah, it's true.
What is true? What is not true?
Yep.
I've had a lot of talks with my dad about politics. I would say I'm fiscally conservative and socially liberal in many ways. And for me, it's people ask, "Oh, what party do you support?" Like, you're gonna have to ask me an issue question.
Exactly.
Because I'm not gonna just say this or this. It really depends.
Yeah.
On what it is, and it's fascinating to hear my dad, just because his optic on time and political cycles is so much longer. He's losing faith.
Yeah.
It's.
It's really there are so many people. There are so many people who.
I don't think it's accidental.
It's not. It's not, because the more we are disengaged
or arguing with each other.
Yep.
That's how I would do it.
The greater their ability to consolidate their power and to continue to erode and try to take away ours, which is obviously directly opposite to what our founders intended, and the words that we see in our founding documents.
Here's the big question. How pumped are you for these debates? Interesting requirements from Biden.
Yeah, no audience.
No audience. And I mean, in fairness, I can see why he maybe would want to do that. They were perhaps boisterous at times the last time.
Well, Trump plays to a crowd. I mean, it's what he does.
The man can rile up a crowd.
Yes.
For sure. Like I said, I feel like you should be able to talk openly about strengths and weaknesses. My man can get a crowd going. He gives some of the longest speeches, the most verbose and just full of words. Like, we could cut out a few adjectives, but he really can get it going.
Yep.
But I just, I wonder how that will go. What was it? Turn the microphone off as soon as your time is up. Do you think they get the questions beforehand? A broad sense of the questions?
Well, I can tell you I didn't.
Okay.
So in a normal environment, I didn't. But also we know that Hillary Clinton got questions in advance from CNN for one of those interviews. So I wouldn't put anything past them at this point. I don't think, I don't know that Fox, I think the ones that have been agreed to, I don't see them passing Trump any cheat sheets in advance. The only reason why I would think that they may hesitate to do the same for Biden is that, you know, I mean, it just completely ruins their credibility, whatever's left of it, if they get caught doing that.
I was shocked he agreed to do it twice.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a good strategic move for him. And by that, I'm talking about Biden.
Yeah.
It was, again, I was in France, and I am going to be as generous as possible about some of the videos that are out there. People are like, hey, Biden shit his pants. I'm like, listen, I'm not saying that because, one, I feel for him as a person being that age.
Exactly.
I don't give a shit if he's a Democrat or a Republican. My heart breaks for somebody that you, in my opinion, I'm not a medical expert, but you can see struggling with the daily conditions of life.
Yeah.
I feel bad for him. And, you know, he came up on stage, and most people will say he was trying to sit in a chair. There was no chairs on the stage, and he had just walked onto the stage and should have been able to see that there wasn't a chair on the stage. But again, it's not a cognitive expert. But if that is the best we have to offer as this country, and then he left without addressing the World War II veterans, which, by the way, like I mentioned, were rock stars. Flooded.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to see them.
Yeah.
I don't know how him locking himself into a room with Trump is going to go with cameras.
Yeah.
But I do want to know what drugs they give him.
That's what I was going to say. what kind of preparation, you know, the normal debate prep. I don't see that happening. I have a feeling it will probably have significant viewership, primarily because of that. Like, I am interested to see how they both interact with each other. There's the whole tough guy thing. You know, we've seen that before. Did you see the Biden video about the debates?
No.
It's I don't know if you can find that.
Oh, Michael.
It's quite they put it out on Instagram, and there's a lot of like quick cuts in the video. But it's Biden posturing and trying to flex.
Yeah.
And basically being like, "Let's go, bro. Let's take it outside." It's
I mean, I'm a huge fan of violence. Their combined age is 157 years. I don't like. What are they going to fight with? Q-tips? I mean, come on. Let's make.
No. And to me, it's just like, I don't know. It is okay. Yeah, okay. Maybe you got some clicks. Maybe you got some views out of this, but maybe I'm just too serious of a person. I don't know, because I look at what's going on, and if we end up with just some version of what these debates honestly very often are, regardless of who's on the stage, and this is why I found my experience on the debate stage to be pretty bad, quite frankly.
Yeah. The odds were not stacked in your favor.
They were not. I would say they were very much against my favor.
Yeah.
But even with the average of 6.5 minutes I got in a 2-hour debate, you know, I did my best to maximize them. And like, I don't care what question you ask me, I have 60 freaking seconds. I'm going to speak directly to the American people about the thing that I want them to take away from. And that was my approach. But that's the decision that you have to make. The problem that I saw too often, as we see, it's political theater where you just have people accusing each other, calling each other names. And that's why, at least in 2020, we saw, I think the first debate had, I don't know, 25 million viewers. And then the next debate had 17. And the next debate had 12. And then the next one had 7. And then 4. And people are just like, I don't want to spend time watching these people try to tear each other apart.
How did that feel standing up there? It's an immense amount of pressure knowing how many people are watching that.
Yeah, there's pressure. I don't know. I'm sure this was developed over years of whether it's a combination of military and life and everything else, of just like, you know, there's nerves for sure. But walking out of the green room and walking up the steps to walk on the stage, feel the nerves, but then once I'm there, it's just like tunnel vision focus on the mission and the task at hand. And so I never felt like, I never sat there and was like, oh my God, I'm on this stage with all there's Joe Biden and there's this person, that person. There's like a crowd of 5,000 people and there's probably 20 million people. Like it didn't even like.
I think it would derail you if you thought like that.
Yeah.
I think the best you can do, for me, anytime I get nervous about stuff, I remind myself, just be yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't play character.
Nope.
Because characters have an expiration, and it's just you're one statement away from falling outside of the story arc of your character.
Yeah.
Then you have an uphill battle. But if you
I
can just
agree.
be yourself
I agree.
and be honest,
Yeah.
it doesn't make it easier. But yeah,
I think it does. I think personally, I mean, I never tried to be somebody else, but I would imagine that it is easier when you're not, you take a stressful situation, then you add another layer of stress on it that you're trying to
your
pretend to
character
be
role.
something that you're not.
Yeah. Then
it's just like, it's going to fall apart. At some
I do
point.
think there should be a rule: you have to answer the question asked. That's one of my favorites. So what do you think about border policy? Well, I'm glad that you asked. The war in Ukraine. And just like, no, even though I've gone through media training and they say exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Regardless of what they ask you, you say what you want. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, but that's not what I was asked.
Yeah.
And I kind of look like an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. It goes
Yeah.
against the grain of what a normal conversation should be.
Yeah.
But I think that is the problem with that whole system of debates. If they were to put President Biden and Trump sitting like this across the table, and yes, you have a moderator there, and actually have a back and forth and a dialogue, that to me would be fascinating.
That would get hundreds of millions of views.
It would. It absolutely would. But this 60 seconds, like, okay, sum up what you will do as president to secure the borders. Like, okay, I'm going to secure the border. But you want me to get into the nuances and the complexities of how do you actually execute that policy? That takes much more than 60 seconds.
A touch more than 60 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah, you could maybe articulate the 30,000-foot view in 60 seconds.
Right. And then the problem there, too, is a lot of the moderators and hosts, the questions that they ask are intended to invoke some kind of theatrical, dramatic response. And they're frankly not very interested in the position that you're putting forward to talk about either.
How many people do you think are actually willing to have their mind changed when we get to the debate anyway? I'm curious if it's all theater. Like, is there really anybody watching that like, okay, I'm a blank slate.
Yeah.
I don't know who it's going to be because I haven't heard anything about any of them, which is bullshit. We've all heard a ton.
Yes.
How many people
And this is the first time in our lives that we have two presidents running against each other, both of whom have a full 4-year record to show.
Yeah.
So it's not just soundbite. It's like, no. Here's what you actually did. That number, though, is
a fact
quite
checker
small.
would be awesome.
That would be real time.
Either person, and I close down the border, be like, and pause.
Yeah.
Here are the numbers for this month.
Right.
Define for me closed.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Like, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
That, I think, would change people's minds.
Right.
And maybe that's why they don't do it.
Yeah. There's been talk about it at different times. I'd be curious to see, of course, it was introduced when Trump was either running for president or maybe he was already president, where the news, cable news channels were talking about putting those live fact checkers. I think they also tried it with that Gavin Newsom, Ron DeSantis debate.
How'd that go?
I actually watched most of it. It was interesting. Obviously two very, very different people.
Yeah.
Let me so you didn't see it at all?
No.
At one point, this is probably all you need to know. At one point, because you're not allowed to come in with anything. Like you're not allowed to come with a notebook or a laptop or anything, right? You just come in, there's a pad of paper and there's a pen there, and that's it. And so at one point, they were talking about homelessness. They were talking about how many all of your people are leaving California and coming to Florida. So at one point, Ron DeSantis opens his suit jacket and pulls out a piece of paper, unfolds it, and it's a picture of a pile of shit.
Was it taken in San Francisco?
That was his point. That was his point. That was So
I've had Michael pull up the human shit tracking app.
Yes,
in San Francisco.
I've heard about this.
It is unbelievable. I used to go there. I mean, a 90-minute drive from Santa Cruz. The only time I've seen it clean is when the Chinese delegation came. Mm-hmm. Amazing the impact in that 72 hours.
Yeah. And how quickly things went back.
Oh, instantaneously.
Yeah.
San Francisco was a shiny penny for 72 hours.
Yeah.
I wonder where they pushed all of those people to. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've seen it happen.
Yes, there it is.
Oh my gosh.
Real time.
So this is kind of like people. This is like crowdsourced. Obviously, people will
Yes.
just go and ping this
Yep.
as
There's
they're
an
walking
app.
down
There's
the
an
street.
app you can download. Michael,
Look at
now I only see was the big ones. We need to go in a little
Nice.
closer. We're targeting here. Oh my God. Some of those appear to be either in buildings or on the roofs. Impressive. This is
Wow.
a city, one of the major cities in
Yeah.
California in
Yeah.
a first world country. And we have an app that is downloaded by the citizens that live there to track where human beings go to the bathroom.
Jeez.
Well, I mean, at what point does it become untenable? Where it is at a point where it cannot be salvaged. You can read news about large industry pulling out of San Francisco. They're unable to. Well, again, smash and grab robberies
Yeah.
in broad daylight. My brother-in-law is a drummer in a band, and they were there playing. And he said, I might be getting this a little bit off, but I think they were at where they were going to play, kind of hanging out out back, and they were watching crime occur.
Yeah.
Broad daylight. When they left the hotel, the advice that they were given was, do not stop at red lights.
What?
Yes. Now, I think that was through a certain district or zone, but that's what the hotel staff said. Don't stop at red lights because they will smash your windows. They'll grab stuff out of your car. This is a first world country that we
Yeah.
live in. I'd like to believe so.
Yeah.
How do we reverse course on that?
Well, you're seeing some people. So the mayor of San Francisco is a woman named London Breed, and she was, I think, originally one of the defund the police kind of advocates, like a lot of these big cities were. And now
It's
she
not
has
working out so well.
she has made this argument to her city council or supervisors, whatever they're called there, to provide more funding to the police because what they did clearly is not working.
I've never seen politicians defund their security detail,
No.
which
No.
is odd.
Yeah. Yeah. Little hypocrisy. Little hypocrisy. That the
Defund-
Chicago mayor.
The police that protects thee.
Yes.
But not the police that protects me.
Exactly.
I mean, at some point in time, I don't blame people for not paying attention.
Yeah.
It's like they're just a character.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this? Came up a bunch over in Europe as well. Actually, I was able to sit down with General Donahue and his CSM of the 82nd recruiting.
Yeah.
All five. Sorry, Space Force. I don't know much about you though. Just being honest. They're all under, except for the Marine Corps, because they're the most special and unique people ever. And I say that with every ounce of love that I have because I love Marines.
Mm-hmm.
Every other branch, though, for about 10 years is under. Not a good sign.
No.
I mean, that's the action arm of our foreign policy. Then you have people starting to talk about, well, let's just, PMC it, private military contractors, which my personal thoughts are if our military and foreign policy are not aligned in capability, we have to change one or both. I'm not a fan of outsourcing war. I'm not saying there's not a role for PMCs, but I think when people don't have, I think wearing your country's flag is rarefied air.
It is.
And I don't think it should be something you're able to rent. I think it should be something that you're issued. I'm not saying there's no role for PMCs, but who do they report to? What governing documents are they held to? What's the accountability and responsibility? And there's a litany of information to show that things get off the rails with that.
Yeah.
But if we can't even staff a military capable of the foreign policy that we want to project into the world, I mean, again, we've talked about quite a few problems. That layers on another one, though, for sure.
Did he have an opinion? Did General Donahue have an opinion on the greatest challenges or how they're trying to tackle it?
He opened with that the Army is on glide slope this year to meet standards.
Okay.
What I didn't get the chance to ask him is why. I'm worried what might have happened is they lowered their quota as opposed to got more people to enlist.
Yeah.
Because that's how math works.
Yeah.
There's a couple different ways you can get to the end
Exactly.
state. And I didn't have time to research it. It was real time.
Yeah.
And 1 year doesn't solve the problem.
No.
You need a decade of sustained enlistment.
Yeah.
And I think people now are viewing military service as something that is measure of last resort, perhaps. Only if you have nothing else. Explore all of their options, and then maybe I'll go give it 4 years. I don't know how we fix that.
Yeah. I have some ideas. When we have a generation of young people who have not grown up being taught in schools about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and what is uniquely American and what is special and what they envisioned for our country and what does freedom really mean, learning about both our past and how we got to where we are today. It shouldn't be a surprise then to see a kid who's graduated from high school or maybe has finished college or is in that age where oftentimes people are looking of whether or not to join the military, that they may question, why would I want to go and sign up for a job where I could potentially die, that I'm actually intentionally putting my life on the line? What am I dying for? And this goes right along with the fact that it is becoming more and more popular, certainly in Democrat circles, where people are saying freedom of speech isn't really relevant anymore because I'm offended by your speech.
To anybody who says that.
Well, but this is the problem: is it's becoming it's no longer like, wait, what? You just said that? It's now is like, okay, well, people who say hateful things or offensive things, their speech should not be allowed to be heard because they're being harmful to others. Or, obviously the government is coming from this strong position of saying, well, what you're saying is not fact, therefore it's misinformation or disinformation, and we're going to directly or indirectly stop you from being able to have a platform to be able to say those things. So these things are all connected. If we have a society that no longer values freedom, then why would anyone want to go and enlist in a military whose role it is to put your life on the line to defend the safety, security, and freedom of the American people?
It almost seems as if people are being pushed or educated towards the thought of having pride or patriotism, like I saw in France, is a negative thing.
It's true.
And that, I don't know how a country survives if you cannot be proud of who you are. And I mean, almost everybody says this. There are horrendous missteps in the course of our country's history.
Yes.
And my first response to that is, please point to me to a country that didn't have those.
Correct.
You won't be able to. Shouldn't be excused. Should be addressed. We do more good throughout the world than any other country that I know of. And again, just literally 24 hours ago, seeing this in real time. These people in tears coming up to say thank you to a man who will never be able to visit there again.
Yeah.
And started his life at a young age. And some of the stories of what these guys did, and they were entrepreneurial, and they had a lot of kids. They got busy in every sense of the word.
Right.
But I mean, of course, somebody's not going to want to fight for their country when they're being told that their country was founded on oppression and the backs of others. And I don't know how we write that narrative, or may not write the narrative, course correct the narrative back towards something at least a little bit more reasonable.
Yeah. I looked back and I included this section in my book from a speech that Martin Luther King Jr. gave in the wake of one of his friends was killed by a white law enforcement officer during one of their peaceful protests. And it was at a time when there were a lot of civil rights activists who were just like, man, screw this. It's time for us to take up arms. They are literally killing us, and we are unarmed. We can't protect or defend ourselves. And Martin Luther King was encouraging them to continue to stay the course of civil disobedience, of nonviolent protest, and invoked our founding principles and values, not by looking at, the horrific sins of the past, of slavery and discrimination, all of these things that led to this moment of national crisis. But he instead invoked those founding principles as the guiding light, the thing that served as a foundation for them to stay that course and be inspired to take those words in the Declaration of Independence of all of us being created equal, all of us granted these inalienable rights by our Creator, and make this sacrifice to bring about this change to achieve that end in this country. And so, yes, we can look to all the negative things in the past, but when we look to courageous people who, I would say probably not universal because there's always, a handful, But when we look to people like Martin Luther King Jr., regardless of your politics, you recognize his courage and the positive impact, historic impact that he had on this country. If at a time that he faced that is far more extreme and radical than anything that any American is facing in our country today, and even he stayed positive and invoked those founding principles as a source of that hope and inspiration. We should take a page out of his book and learn from these people who fought these battles right here at home, who put their lives on the line for freedom and equality right here at home. Say, okay, how do we respond to this moment, even for people who feel discouraged by, violence or hate speech or this or that? Look at these great leaders of our past and learn how we should chart our path forward and get back on track.
Not that we could do it, but if you could lay out the template of the government and the table in front of you, and it was all looking at you, and you could see the size and scope and the depth and the reach that it has, and you had the ability to do so, to move things around and cut them off, what changes would you make to the current structure
of the federal government? Mm-hmm. It is
to try to get it back towards at least trending in the right direction. You can it's laid out. You can finally see the breadth, depth, and scale. Where do you start?
I think you start by there. I think there are multiple parallels that would need to happen at the same time. In order to have the flexibility to bring about the kind of transformational change, there are some laws that need to be changed in order for that to happen. So we talked about, the quote unquote civil servants. We talk about the administrative state. That is an essential change that needs to occur. There needs to be a wholesale objective audit of every federal agency, not just in the traditional sense of where are the taxpayer dollars going, how is it being spent, but actually measure metrics of effectiveness and performance. Look at, why does this entity exist? Why does the Department of Education exist? Why does Housing and Urban Development exist? You look at each of these federal agencies, all of them, and recognize, all right, what is their mission? What is their purpose? Look at their budget and look at the programs that exist within there. Are they advancing towards that objective or not? And maybe fundamentally asking, even before that, is this a function that should exist within the federal government? Or should it be something that is decentralized down to the lowest, the state and local level? Mm-hmm. Education, I think, is a good example of that. And this is something that, I was homeschooled, so I didn't come up through the public education system, which gives me some objectivity here in looking at this and recognizing, kids going to school here in Montana are a very different group of people than kids going to school in Hawaii. There's different demographics, different needs, different challenges, and all of this kind of stuff. The idea that we should have a federal government that creates this cookie cutter concept of education for kids across the country, it's not my or your opinion. We can look at the fact that we have more functionally illiterate kids graduating from school now than we have certainly in a very, very, very long time. The actual numbers are deeply disturbing. And when we see, and I think it was like in Oregon or Washington State, when they saw there were a lot of kids who were not going to graduate high school because they couldn't pass the test, what did they do? They took the test away and said, all right, you can just graduate anyway.
COVID and online school did not help that. Holy cow. You want to talk about a gap in the educational system?
Yeah.
I mean, photocopy your face and put it up in front of your Zoom camera.
Yeah.
Not that my kids would ever do that to us, Tulsi. It's, put a mannequin up there with like a little bobblehead.
Right.
They lost 18 months of legitimate schooling opportunity. Yeah. I do believe, I can only speak for the teachers up here, I think they were doing the absolute best that they could.
Yeah.
But they encountered things like, oh shit, not everybody has access to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they do, not everybody has access to a computer or a tablet that they could do their work on.
Right.
The number of children that were getting their main sustenance from the school program that are being trapped in an abusive, all of those things compounded to 18 months of, I don't know how much education occurred. They were doing the best that they could.
Oh, yeah.
I just don't think it was a medium that suits children very well.
Yeah.
And the data is, like you said, it's back.
Yeah.
It's not a Tulsi or any opinion. It's like
Nope.
we kind of suck across all these metrics.
My father-in-law, Abe's dad, was a public high school teacher through COVID, and he spent over 20 years in the system. And literally, like, there was kids who didn't participate in the online class, no consequence at all. So at times, maybe half the class was just like no-show for the whole year, nothing. There's no, again, no, there's no, okay, you get extra homework, or you get this or that, or you even get a failing grade. Like, there was nothing that as a teacher he could do to make sure that his kids that he was responsible for teaching were actually getting the coursework that he provided.
It's such a failure to our kids. It's such a failure.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they have YouTube.
Right.
That's how my kids learn. How do you?
Yeah.
Again, my 18-year-old was a day trader for a bit. I'd hear it smashing into keys because, of course, he bought a keyboard that makes larger-than-life noises for reasons I don't understand.
It's the gaming keyboards, I think.
It is. And
I don't get it either.
I'd go in there in the middle of the night. His hat's on backwards, huge computer glasses. Which, Michael, you've seen his glasses, haven't you? He wears them. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm teaching myself how to day trade. I'm like, for the love of God, please do not put all of your money into this. Like,
And then he'll wake up and say, like, yeah, I made 20 grand last night.
yeah, like I fully support what you're doing, but please don't
Yeah.
put all of your money that you're making from window cleaning
Right.
and hanging Christmas tree lights.
Yeah.
But not everybody wants to use those. And again,
Yeah.
not everybody has access to those tools. Not
Yeah.
everybody is in a family dynamic where that is rewarded or celebrated or even allowed.
Yeah.
Some people are just fighting for survival.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's rough.
Decentralization is really where I think we need to focus more on. The government, the federal government has been huge and has only gotten bigger, and the power has become more and more consolidated there. And the way that they do it and extract power away from the states and from the counties or cities is they dangle the carrot and stick of federal funding.
Yeah.
And so this again, we'll go back to Title IX. The forcing function of compliance that President Biden's administration put in place, which, by the way, they destroyed Title IX not by amending the law through Congress, which is Civics 101 about how you're supposed to do these things. In a democratic republic, he did it through a back channel rule change through the Federal Department of Education. And the consequence is, if a school says, no, we're not going to comply with that, then the federal government will withhold funding for what they call free and reduced lunch for those kids who don't have money to be able to buy their breakfast or to buy their lunch, or otherwise they will go to school hungry. So
you can't say it's free will when somebody's standing there with the baseball bat over one of the options.
Exactly. And this is the power that they wield. There are wholesale changes and massive cuts to every single federal agency, if not actually saying, no, this doesn't belong in the federal government. We're going to get rid of this department and put the responsibility for this back in the states where it belongs. The challenge here is that it will require a tremendous amount of courageous leaders to go in and know you're going to piss off a ton of people by doing this. And it's going to take a president who has the courage to say, you know what, I'm good with that, because this is where, and be able to talk to the American people about this, actually communicate, hey, here's where we are and here's why this is so broken. Here's the changes that we are going to implement. And some of them you're not going to like, because your brother might be one of those people who might lose his job when we get rid of Department X, Y, or Z. But this is how we get to a place where our government is limited in the ways that our founders envisioned in order to empower local communities, families, local leaders, and state leaders, so you can actually hold them to account, which is harder to do when you have people in Washington doing things that you probably aren't aware of, and to make sure that at every level, leaders are better stewards of your taxpayer dollars.
Can you imagine trying to explain to one of the founding fathers that there would be people in politics for 45 years?
No.
They'd be like, what are you talking about?
No.
Don't you have to go back and work your farm?
Exactly. Exactly.
Or the size of the federal government.
It's insane.
What they wrote at that time, and I mean, for a document to have lasted that long, amazing. I don't think they could have forecast the size it is now and people making a career out of politics.
Yeah. But they did envision people who get so attached to power. And that's to me the wisdom of this, is they recognize the fragility of this system of governance and how prone those in power may be to abuse that power, which is why they put the checks and balances in place that they did.
God, I would pay so much money to be a fly on that wall.
Yeah. No kidding.
Just to watch it happen.
Yeah. The cool thing that I think a lot of people don't maybe realize or remember is, and this kind of goes back to, I have met so many people who won't even have conversations about like we're having, or conversations about issues with their friends that they know they might disagree with because they're too afraid. They're too afraid to actually say what they really feel about politics or these issues or candidate X, Y, or Z. And I remind people, like, why do we feel like we have to agree on everything? Like, that doesn't exist in real life at all.
I was going to say, you ever been in a relationship?
Right,
Have fun with that.
exactly. And if one person is saying, yes, I agree to everything, like, that's a pretty screwed up relationship.
Run as fast as you can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But, like, reading about the fiery debates that the founders of our country had, both in private and in very, very public ways, sometimes resorting to physical violence, which I don't recommend.
At the Capitol.
Exactly.
I was just there doing some work with a government agency, and I got a tour of the Capitol building. And they're like, yeah, in this room, this guy got so pissed, he came over and almost beat this dude to death.
Yes.
Like, I'm kind of here for that. Let's work that shit out.
Did they show you the bullet holes that are still in the ceiling of the,
Yes. It was cool. We got to go all the way up on top.
Oh, that's cool.
What a spectacular view.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. Yeah, that was a great tour.
But the point was, in spite of their disagreements, they came together around the most important things. And I keep coming back to that because I think it's important for us to remember where we can find that hope and where we can go.
I agree. Was this the first book you've written?
Yes.
How did you enjoy the process?
Enjoy is not a word that I would use.
How would you
There is
describe
no
the process?
It took a lot longer than I anticipated. So again, first time doing this, I didn't stop doing anything else in my life so that I could really set aside time to
So
sit
in all of
and
your
read
just
the
oodles
book.
of free time, you were just
Right.
pen and paper.
And then the days, and this is, the days that I would set aside, I'd be like, okay, I've got like whatever, marked out this whole week. Like, okay, I got a day. Like, how do you get your creative juices flowing so that once you're
demand?
in the groove, so I'd sit there and be like, nothing's coming to me. Let me go do the dishes real fast. All of a sudden, laundry was like the most rewarding task that I could complete because it's like, okay, I can do this, and it's done. Okay, laptop. Like,
yeah.
And then, of course, once you get there, it's great and it's good and everything's flowing and I feel really good and I've made a lot of progress. But it's definitely a process. I had somebody who I hired to help me with this, mostly because I have a pretty busy life. That was a whole learning process as well, where, great guy. He's a ghostwriter for a lot of different people who are very, very well known. But ultimately, when I ended up having to take the time, missed a bunch of deadlines to go in and rewrite most of it, to make sure that the words on the page were reflective of me and my heart and my experiences and the lessons that I've learned and the conclusions that I'm drawing because of all of these things. It was definitely a learning process, but I'm grateful to have gone through it. And to get to the point where the feedback I'm getting from people who've read the book or listened to the audiobook, that both people who know me, but also just total strangers, that they really felt like they got to know me and better understood why I say the things that I say, why I'm doing the things that I'm doing in the world of politics, and most importantly, by the end, feeling hopeful, because I go into a lot of dark places in the book.
Well, if you're talking about our government, I'm not sure there's a lot of bright places currently.
Which is true.
Yeah.
It's true.
You made the New York Times bestseller list.
Yes. I was surprised.
How awesome is that?
I was surprised that they let my book on the list.
I have heard that it is not a linear scale to land on that list.
No.
That there are many variables, some public, some more backroom.
Yes. And they've said it themselves that ultimately it's an editorial decision. Like they will never disclose what the quote unquote metrics are that they like, okay, if you sell this many books, then you'll get on the list. Like you would think that, I mean, I don't know why that should be a secret, right? Like, okay, if you're an author and you go out, it's like, okay, if I got to sell 5,000, is it 5,000 or is it 50,000 books? Like what's the standard here?
I've heard both.
Yeah, exactly. Because it changes.
Yeah. Depending on the person, genre.
Yep.
Gender is another one that I've heard as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, of course, who withholds information, right? It's the bastion of integrity. Anybody who just tells you like, hey, just play my game, but I'm not going to tell you the rules.
Yes.
They definitely have your best interest in mind.
Yes. Yes. So I was, it was on the list, I think, for 2 or 3 weeks.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
What's the second book going to be?
It's very good.
Since you're so pumped about the process. Which is what if you make the bestseller list,
yeah.
it seems like the next thing you have to write another one.
Is that how it works?
I don't know. That's what Jack Carr told me.
That guy.
Well, first off,
he
he might have been under a 6-book contract at the time, so that might have
Okay.
just been like fluff, but
Yeah.
he cranks them out.
Oh my gosh.
You know what he never told anybody while he was in?
What?
Which is smart, that he wanted to be a writer. Because we would have beat the
Yeah,
shit
of
out of
course.
him.
Of course. He's so good at it, though.
He is way more creative than I went to Buds with him.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Oh, we've known each other since '97.
Okay.
He hit it well. Smart man.
Yeah.
He had the foresight. Never show my underbelly because we're coming for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably, if you don't know that going into Buds, you probably pick up on that real quick.
You learn real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, you learn real quick. Do you think you'll do a second one though?
Yeah. Yeah, mostly for a few reasons. One is in the world of, posts on X, tweets, sound bites in a 3 to 4 minute interview on a cable news channel. I love the longer podcasts. They're great opportunities. But there's, we talked about like, how do I find information? Like, how do I determine the truth? And frankly, for people who work in politics, a lot of times it's easy to just for people to become these caricatures that people can't relate to just as humans, as people.
Yeah.
And so this book was this is why I wrote the book, was really to be able to get everything down on paper for those who are interested. As it turns out, there are a lot of Democrats who are looking to leave the Democrat Party right now. So the relevancy of knowing like, hey, you're not alone, and here's what I went through. Maybe you can relate, maybe you can't, but this is what I went through. Books have the opportunity of actually being able to have a definitive source of, you can agree with me or not, but this is who I am. This is why I believe what I believe, and this is where I think we should go. And so a couple of topics that I look forward to taking on is, surprise, surprise, war and peace. Issues related to foreign policy, obviously related to all of our experience over the last 20 plus years, but really looking at down the multiple barrels that exist today on many fronts around the world.
Literal and metaphorical.
Yep. And and this is the most, I've talked to a bunch of, I'll get asked to come and speak to like a leadership, professional development thing for different units in the military and this and that, which is great. I love doing it. And I always hate that I don't have great news for them about like, oh, tell us how Congress works. It's
like, ooh, I was here to inspire you.
I know. But really, when we look at these decision makers that we're talking about, who are deciding what country we're going to go to war with next, whether they're saying it directly or not, they are laying the groundwork for what will eventually lead us to that point, and how few of them know what the cost of war is directly or indirectly, nor do they take care to try to learn. If you haven't served, why don't you go spend some time with some Gold Star families?
Seriously. How could it's like a dereliction of your duty to not try to understand.
I agree completely. Add to that how few of them actually take the time to do the homework and to learn, okay, you want to go to war, someone's advocating to go to war with this country. Why don't you start learning a little bit about the history of that country? First of all, who are the people there? What are the cultural challenges they may have faced that have caused them to come to this point? Let's look at the history of our country with that country. Who are the other countries that are involved, and actually really understanding the context of these situations instead of just being like, oh, bad, we got to go to war, kill, defeat. And then what? Is that actually serving our country's national security interests? Is it serving our economic interests? Will it actually bring about if you're saying the goal is to impose democracy on another country, you really think this is going to accomplish that?
Well, history shows it works so many times.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Binary. What you're describing is a binary solution to something that is anything but binary.
That is exactly my point.
We go, war, invade, leave. No, none of it looks anything like that.
No. And that's my point, is you have people. I had people when I was there. I served for almost 8 years on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs committees. My experience of serving in a war zone was what drove me to run for Congress in the first place and for president. And so I'd have colleagues of mine come up to me and say, hey, there's a really important foreign policy vote coming up. How are you voting on this? And sincerely asking. And I was like, well, I'm voting this way, and here are the reasons why. And then saying, thank you so much. That makes so much sense. You just helped me make my decision, which is great. But that's because I've done the work. I've actually done the work to make an informed vote and make this informed decision. And I can explain it to you.
What would they do without you, though?
That's my point. The vast majority of them will either hey, the party says to vote this way or that way, and they'll just go vote down party line. Or they'll look at oh, what did they say on Morning Joe this morning on MSNBC? Oh, really? Okay. Or what is the president? If it's the president that's in your party too often, they're like, okay, this is what Biden wants, we'll go along. And we saw it also with Republican presidents. Oh, this is what President Bush wants. Oh, okay, I guess we're just going to go along. Yeah. And this is the sad truth and reality that we face. This is going off on all these tangents, but why I think I want to be able to put this down in the form of a book that people can access it or reference it or whatever to help get to that better place of holding our leaders to a higher standard.
I also think the medium is going to have a comeback.
You think so?
Because I find if I'm on my phone, and maybe this is just me, I'll get to a place where it actually disgusts me that I'm flipping through stuff with my, it almost nauseates me a little bit. Yeah. And I want to slow down and touch a book and pick it up. Yeah. Because it's less, you're getting information. Yeah. But I can't swipe up on your book and check Instagram real fast.
That's true.
Even though, God, I'm embarrassed to admit this. I have looked at pictures before in books, and before even realizing I was doing it, I'm like, shit, it's paper.
I have not done that one before.
It'll happen too.
Wow.
That's how far it's like the mouse with the sugar water. I'm just sitting there just trying to why can't I look at this? Oh my God, it's a newspaper.
It's a paper. Yeah. It's a piece of paper.
Well, and it sticks with you. And I find for me, when I travel a lot too. Yeah. Audiobooks, cool, but they don't stick with me as much. Yeah. Reading books. Yeah. And oftentimes for me, I'll read and I will go back.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I'll read and I'll go back because my thoughts start drifting, and I almost think that's because of this damn anxiety rectangle.
True. Absolutely true.
So I think the more digital the world gets, it's like vinyl. Mm-hmm. I think there's just a frequency or a resonance there that sticks with people. So I'm glad that you are committing those type of things.
I hope so.
To that medium. Look at you, got Joseph up top.
Yeah.
God, he's so short. He's such a good dude.
He packs a punch, man.
That guy.
I was on his podcast recently and talking about the book, but he invited me to go work out with him and some of the comedian guys. No, it was great. It was great. But
his facility there is ridiculous. Yeah. Did you just work out there? It is.
Yeah. 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 yeah, it was just, and then then after the workout, we did the sauna and then
Yeah.
did the cold plunge, and
Hard
then
pass.
that was my first 3 minutes in a cold plunge, and it was painful.
Physically, it's painful. Emotionally, I just want no part of it. I'm just like, no. Tim wants to go swim every day out
Yeah.
in France.
Yeah.
And we went and worked out, and I think one day I walked out to my waist. And he's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, okay, here's my analogy. You work at Baskin-Robbins for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Are you really going to go there on your day off to try a new flavor?
That is legit. That's legit. I would accept that. I would fully accept that.
He's like, oh, okay.
I'm an ocean person. I do my best to try to jump. If I'm near a body of water, I'm gonna do my best to jump in that body of water.
Until they tortured me with it.
Yeah, fair point, man.
Yeah.
Totally fair
Now,
point.
I mean, I'll take the ocean in the form of its snow coming down on the mountain so I can snowboard.
That's like people telling me, and no dig on the people who pay a lot of money to go and run these obstacle courses.
I have a few digs on them.
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm sorry, but no. And like, let's go camping. Like, no.
Again, in France, they did GoRuck was there. It's like a 12-miler to Point du Hoc. Like, does anybody want to go? And people are looking at me like, I'm going to raise my hand. It's like, why don't you want to go? I'm like, why do you want to go?
See, this is, I don't know if this is, people can psychoanalyze me all they want, but I'm still in the Army Reserve. And so, we had the best teams competition with my soldiers recently. I'm a battalion commander. And so the kids, they had to go and compete for a 10-mile ruck through the mountains of Oregon. And, I'm like, cool, man, let's go. I'm joining. They're like, what? You're coming? They're like, hell yeah, I'm coming with you.
See, that's awesome, though.
I am a glutton for, and I it's painful and, whatever, it sucks, but I love it.
Tim led a workout on the beach and stopped in the middle of the workout because I was sitting up on the wall at Omaha Beach where he's leading the workout. Andy Stumpf, how come you're not down here? And I just gave him I'm just like, and turned around.
He's not going to peer pressure you.
0% chance he's forcing me to go down there.
Yeah.
And then what do they do after workout? They
Go
went
jump
into
in the
ocean.
water. Of course, naturally.
I have to get you over to the coffee shop to sign your book. What would you like to close out with?
We should be heartened by the fact that all of the stuff that the most powerful people in our country are throwing against us, and that's both with the government, their friends in big tech, their friends in big media, everything that they are trying to do to take our power away, we should feel empowered by knowing the reason they're doing that is because they know the greatest threat to their power is a free people living in a free society. We are only powerful if we use our power. If we sit back and stay home and throw up our hands and say all hope is lost, all hope will be lost. But if we recognize the power that we have to completely shift and change the trajectory of our country away from utter and total destruction in every sense of the word, where our country will become unrecognizable if we don't take action, and towards a country where we can begin to do the tough work, to bring about that dream of Martin Luther King, to bring about that more perfect union that our founders envisioned. But it's on us.
Hell yeah. Let's not wait another 2 years. I think that's how long we danced around finally meeting each other.
Yes.
We know so many people in common,
I know,
too.
it's ridiculous.
Like hundreds of people in common.
I know, it's nuts.
Yeah.
I'm
And you
so
gotta come back
happy
up
to
and
finally be
snowboard.
here. We have to.
Yes.
I'm so bummed I had to
We had a really
I had to
shitty-
write this book. That's why I wasn't able to come and snowboard this year.
If you missed a year, this previous year was the one to miss. Super
Okay,
light
good.
snow year.
Okay.
Like exposed gravel.
That makes me feel a little better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This next year, though, Michael tells me, he's like the farmer's
I'm
almanac.
down.
He tells me it's going to be better.
I'm down. Let's go.
Cool.
After this election, I'm going to be knocking on your door and being like, it's time to put my phone away for a little bit and just go out.
Yes, I'm down. So down. All right.
Play. Thank you.
Yes.